Get out, Julian snapped, his finger jabbing towards the ornate, arched doorway. You don't belong here, and you're unsettling my clientele. His voice, sharp and laced with disdain, reverberated across the polished obsidian floors. Serafina Cole stood her ground in the center of the opulent boutique, her heart a trapped bird fluttering against her ribs. But her resolve was a steel rod. Her grip tightened on the strap of her understated, yet undeniably elegant, handbag as she met Julian's icy stare. I have every right to be here, Serafina stated, her voice a study in controlled calm. And I'm not leaving. A hush fell over the boutique. Customers, who moments before had been murmuring over price tags and admiring shimmering displays, now froze, their attention riveted on the unfolding drama. Whispers, like the rustle of silk, spread through the room. Some discreetly pulled out their phones, eager to capture the confrontation, while others exchanged uneasy glances. You're disrupting the peace, Julian, the boutique's manager, continued, his face blotchy with rising anger. This establishment is for serious patrons, not for gawkers who can't afford a single item. Serafina's jaw tightened, a subtle flicker of pain crossing her features, but her composure remained unblemished. Is that your assessment of me? She inquired, her voice low but carrying the weight of quiet dignity. A mere gawker? Julian scoffed, folding his arms across his tailored suit. Look, I haven't the time for this charade. You're wasting my time, and frankly, everyone else's. Vacate the premises, or I shall summon the authorities. Was Julian justified in demanding Serafina's departure, solely based on his perception of her? As we delve into the origins of this clash, if you stand against prejudice and discrimination, hit the subscribe button now and let us know your location. Only those who condone such biases will refrain from subscribing. The day hadn't begun with such theatrics for Serafina. It had dawned peaceful and promising. She had risen early, the city outside her penthouse window already a symphony of motion, and brewed her signature blend of Earl Grey tea. She'd taken a moment to savor the quiet, reflecting on the long, arduous journey that had brought her to this point. Today was momentous. It marked a milestone. Serafina had recently finalized the acquisition of several businesses, a crowning achievement being the purchase of one of the city's most prestigious luxury retail chains. For years, she had nurtured the dream of building her own empire, and now, after decades of relentless work, unwavering resilience, and countless sacrifices, she had realized it. Her thoughts drifted back to her childhood. She vividly remembered standing outside high-end boutiques with her mother, peering through the gleaming windows at the exquisite items they could only dream of possessing. Someday, her mother had whispered, her voice filled with a quiet hope, you'll have more than you could ever imagine. Those words had become Serafina's guiding star. She had toiled tirelessly, building her success brick by painstaking brick, always remaining grounded and true to her values. And now, as the new owner of the very chain she had once admired from afar, she decided to visit one of her boutiques, incognito. She wanted to experience it as any customer would, without the fanfare or entourage that usually accompanied her. Dressed in a simple yet chic blouse and tailored trousers, Serafina entered the boutique that morning with a quiet sense of pride. The obsidian floors gleamed under the dazzling light of crystal chandeliers, and the displays shimmered with meticulously arranged designer handbags, jewelry, and accessories. Her eyes landed on a particular handbag, a timeless design she recognized from her childhood dreams. A faint smile touched her lips. It wasn't just about the bag. It was about the journey it symbolized. But her peaceful reverie was short-lived. From across the boutique, Julian had spotted her almost immediately. He had observed her, his expression shifting from initial curiosity to a sneer of disdain as he made swift, inaccurate judgments based solely on her appearance. In his narrow view, Serafina didn't fit the profile of his ideal customer. Serafina hadn't noticed him at first, too engrossed in admiring the craftsmanship of the items before her. But as she moved to another section, she became aware of his presence. He followed her, his eyes scrutinizing her every move. He approached her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good morning," he said, his tone overly polite, bordering on condescending. May I assist you in finding something specific? I'm just browsing, thank you, Serafina replied, offering a warm smile in return, and turned her attention back to the display. But Julian persisted. He lingered, his gaze narrowing slightly. Perhaps you should explore other establishments, he suggested, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. This boutique caters to a different clientele. You might find something more within your price range elsewhere, somewhere not as high-end as ours. Serafina's smile faded, but she didn't respond. She moved to another display, determined not to let his presumptions ruin her day. But Julian was relentless. You see, he said, louder this time, ensuring other customers could overhear, we often get window shoppers here, individuals who enjoy looking but aren't serious buyers. Serafina stopped. Slowly, she turned to face him, her expression calm but firm. Is that your perception of me? She asked quietly. Julian smirked. I've been in this industry for a considerable time. I can discern who is genuine and who isn't. The humiliation stung, but Serafina refused to let it show. She met his gaze without flinching. I don't believe that's within your purview to decide, she stated, her tone steady, but with an edge that made Julian momentarily falter. If you think such situations still happen, click subscribe. Nearby, a few customers had begun to take notice of the escalating tension. Whispers spread through the boutique like wildfire. Clara, a young sales associate, stood frozen behind a counter, her expression a mixture of discomfort and fear, torn between intervening and protecting her job. As Julian continued to hover, Serafina noticed a woman in an expensive outfit moving quietly near the jewelry display. She watched as the woman was treated very well, almost like a queen, whereas she was being treated with mockery. Serafina's eyes narrowed. But before she could interject, Julian's voice cut through her thoughts. I believe it's time for you to depart, he said sharply. Julian's frustration was palpable as he continued to shadow Serafina through the boutique. His sharp gaze never left her, and with every step she took, his condescension grew more blatant. He seemed determined to make her feel unwelcome. Serafina walked with quiet grace, her focus shifting between the displays of elegant handbags and sparkling jewelry. But Julian wasn't about to let her browse in peace. He stepped in front of her as she approached the handbag display she had admired earlier. I believe we've established that this section might not be suitable for you, he said loudly, his smirk widening as other customers turned to watch. His voice echoed through the obsidian-floored boutique, carrying a mix of feigned politeness and underlying disdain. Perhaps the clearance section in the rear would be a better fit. Serafina's calm expression didn't waver. She tilted her head slightly, her voice soft but steady. And what leads you to believe this section isn't for me? Julian's smirk faded momentarily, but he quickly recovered. Let's just say I've been in this business long enough to know who belongs here and who doesn't. A murmur rippled through the boutique. Nearby customers whispered to each other. Why doesn't she just leave? One woman asked quietly, glancing at Serafina with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Another man shifted uncomfortably, muttering under his breath, this is getting awkward. Serafina ignored them, her focus unwavering. She tried to move around Julian, but he stepped sideways, blocking her path again. His actions were deliberate, his posture unyielding. Loitering is prohibited, he said with a sharp edge in his tone. If you're not purchasing anything, perhaps it's time to move along. What would your reaction be in a similar situation? Let's discuss in the comments. Hit subscribe if you think this story is important, and don't forget to like and share. Serafina's jaw tightened slightly, but she maintained her composure. Loitering, she repeated. I wasn't aware that admiring the merchandise constituted loitering. Julian crossed his arms, his smirk returning. Admiring isn't the same as buying. Clara, the sales representative, standing behind the counter near the jewelry section, witnessed the entire exchange. Her hands gripped the edge of the display case, her knuckles white. She had seen the tension between Julian and Serafina escalate. Clara's chest tightened as she debated what to do. She knew Julian's reputation. He was ruthless with employees who crossed him. If she spoke up, she risked not only his wrath but possibly her job. Yet, she couldn't ignore the growing injustice playing out before her. Her gaze flicked between Julian, who was now gesturing toward the boutique's entrance, and Serafina, who remained steadfast. She took a step forward, hesitated, and then stepped back again. Fear and morality waged a silent war within her. Should Clara step in? Julian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "If you don't leave now," he said, his tone sharp and final, "I'll call the police." The murmurs among the customers grew louder. Julian, oblivious to everything but his own agenda, continued to escalate. "You've wasted enough of my time," he said, his voice louder now, as though addressing the entire boutique. "You're not buying anything, and you're not welcome here." As this exchange unfolded, another customer, Isabella, a woman in her early 40s, observed the chaos with quiet interest. Dressed in an immaculate cream blouse and tailored pants, her expensive leather bag hung loosely on her shoulder, exuding wealth and sophistication. Isabella moved with calculated ease, her sharp eyes scanning the jewelry display. While Julian's attention remained fixated on Serafina, Isabella seized her moment. She reached for a sparkling diamond necklace displayed under the glass, her hand lingering as though admiring it, before she swiftly slipped the necklace into her bag. She glanced around, her movements smooth and practiced, her expression calm. Serafina caught the motion out of the corner of her eye. Her gaze shifted briefly toward Isabella, taking in the theft with a quiet realization. Isabella's demeanor was confident, almost brazen, as she moved to another section of the boutique, selecting a bracelet this time. With the same fluid motion, she slipped it into her bag. Julian, oblivious to the theft happening mere feet away, gestured toward the entrance. "If you refuse to leave, I'll have no choice but to call the authorities," he said, his tone cold and final. Serafina tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady. "Perhaps you should," she said, her calm response catching him off guard. Julian hesitated for a moment before pulling out his phone. "Fine," he snapped. "I'll have the police escort you out and deal with you." As Julian dialed, Isabella moved toward the boutique's exit, her bag now noticeably fuller, swinging gently at her side. She kept her steps measured, her face serene, blending seamlessly with the high-end clientele. Serafina's gaze followed her, sharp and focused. Despite the chaos surrounding her, she didn't miss a single detail. The thief's actions were bold, but Serafina's composure remained unbroken. Serafina's eyes followed her movements, but she said nothing. Her calm composure remained unbroken, even as the tension in the boutique reached a breaking point. Customers whispered louder now, their phones capturing every moment of the standoff. Serafina noticed Isabella's actions, but said nothing. Her calm gaze lingered on the thief for a moment before returning to Julian, who was now speaking loudly into the phone. "Yes, I need officers at my boutique immediately," he said, his voice laced with authority. "We have a woman causing a disturbance and refusing to leave. I'm concerned she may escalate further." Julian ended the call with a satisfied look, his posture straightening as he turned back to Serafina. "Security will be here shortly," he said. "I suggest you cooperate when they arrive." Serafina didn't respond. She stood quietly, her eyes scanning the room as the tension grew thicker. Minutes later, the glass doors at the front of the boutique swung open, and two uniformed police officers entered. Their presence immediately silenced the whispers among the customers. Julian stepped forward eagerly, his voice confident and loud. "Officers, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing toward Serafina. "This woman has been loitering and causing a disturbance. She's refusing to leave, and I believe she may pose a threat." One officer, tall with a commanding presence, nodded. "We'll take care of it," he said. Serafina opened her mouth to speak, but the second officer, a petite woman with a stern expression, held up a hand to stop her. "Ma'am," she said firmly, "we're going to need you to leave the premises." Serafina frowned, her calm demeanor beginning to show cracks. "Excuse me," she said. "You haven't even asked for my side of the story." The male officer stepped closer, his tone leaving little room for argument. "We're not here to debate. The manager has made it clear that you're no longer welcome here. Please leave now, or we'll have to escort you out." Julian stood behind the officers, his smirk widening as he watched the scene unfold. Customers whispered louder now, their phones capturing every moment. Clara, the young sales associate, stood frozen behind the counter, her hands gripping the edge tightly. Serafina remained still, her gaze shifting between the officers and Julian. "You're taking his word without even questioning what's happening here?" she asked. The female officer's expression hardened. "Ma'am, we were called because you're causing a disturbance. If you don't comply, we'll have to remove you." The tension in the boutique was suffocating, the air heavy with anticipation. Julian stood near Serafina, his smirk still lingering, but less assured. Customers whispered among themselves, some filming discreetly while others openly gawked. Isabella, the customer who had been slowly inching toward the exit, kept her head low, confident she would slip away unnoticed. If you enjoy the story, hit subscribe. Suddenly, the doors to the boutique swung open. A sleek black car pulled up just outside, its polished surface gleaming under the sunlight. Two sharply dressed men entered first, their presence commanding immediate attention. Behind them, a tall woman in a tailored suit strode in with an air of authority that turned every head in the room. The murmurs grew louder, curiosity rippling through the crowd. The two men and the woman walked straight toward Serafina, their steps deliberate. They stopped just in front of her, and one of the men smiled warmly. "Miss Cole," he said, his voice respectful, "sorry we're late. Are you ready for the walkthrough?" For the first time, Julian's confident demeanor faltered. His face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Customers gasped, their shock evident as they began to piece together what was happening. Clara, the young sales associate, brought a trembling hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Serafina turned to Julian, her expression calm but commanding. Her voice carried a quiet strength as she said, "I'm Serafina Cole, the new owner of this boutique chain, and I believe we have a lot to discuss." The room fell into stunned silence. Julian looked as though the floor had been pulled out from beneath him. He stammered, his usual arrogance replaced by sheer panic. "You're the owner?" Serafina's gaze didn't waver. "That's correct," she replied. "And I've been observing how you manage things. I must say, it's been enlightening." Before Julian could respond, Serafina raised a hand, silencing him. She turned slightly, her eyes landing on Isabella, who was just steps away from the door. Serafina's calm demeanor hardened, her voice cutting through the silence. "Before we proceed any further," she said, "you might want to examine that customer's bag." The statement hit the room like a thunderclap. Every head turned toward Isabella, whose body stiffened as the spotlight suddenly fell on her. Her hand froze on the door handle, and her face drained of color. Julian blinked, clearly confused. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice shaky. Serafina took a deliberate step forward, her gaze locked on Isabella. "I witnessed her slipping a bracelet and a necklace into her bag," she said, her tone unwavering. "While you were preoccupied with harassing me, she was busy stealing from the boutique." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Customers whispered furiously, some lifting their phones to record the unfolding drama. Isabella, who had been so confident moments before, now looked like a cornered animal. Her lips trembled as she stammered, "I didn't. This is ridiculous." Serafina ignored her protest, turning back to Julian. "Would you like to handle this?" she said coolly. "Or should I?" Julian, now visibly sweating, looked toward Isabella. I'm sure this is a misunderstanding," he said weakly. "She doesn't seem like the type to." Serafina cut him off. "The type?" she repeated, her voice sharp. "You mean the type you assume is innocent based on their appearance, while I, the owner of this boutique, am treated like I don't belong?" At that moment, two security guards entered the boutique, alerted by the escalating tension. Serafina turned to them and pointed toward Isabella. "Check her bag," she instructed calmly. "I believe you'll find what you're looking for." Isabella's composure shattered. "You have no right," she shouted, clutching her bag tightly. "This is an invasion of privacy." One of the guards stepped forward. "Ma'am, we'll need to verify this," he said firmly. "Please hand over your bag." Isabella hesitated, her face flushing with humiliation as every eye in the boutique watched her. Finally, under the weight of their stares, she handed over the bag, her hands trembling. The guards opened it, and within seconds, the evidence was clear. A sparkling diamond bracelet and an elegant necklace sat nestled among her belongings, their price tags still attached. Gasps filled the air, and several customers muttered in disbelief. "She was stealing the whole time," someone whispered. "And we all thought—" Isabella tried to stammer out an excuse. I was going to pay for those. I just forgot." Serafina raised a hand, silencing her. "Save it," she said coldly. "I saw precisely what you did." The guards escorted Isabella to the back office, her protests growing weaker as she disappeared from view. Serafina turned back to Julian, her expression firm. "This is the culture you fostered," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "targeting individuals like me while ignoring actual criminals. That ends today." Julian stammered, trying to find words, but none came. His arrogance had crumbled completely, leaving only shame and fear in its place. Serafina turned to the staff and customers, her voice steady and clear. "This boutique will no longer tolerate discrimination or incompetence," she said. "From now on, we will lead with fairness, respect, and integrity." As the crowd murmured in agreement, Serafina glanced at Clara, who stood frozen near the counter. "Clara," Serafina said, her tone softening, "I've seen your potential. You're part of the solution here." Clara blinked, her eyes welling with tears as she nodded. "Thank you, Miss Cole," she whispered. Serafina gave her a small smile before turning back to Julian. "As for you," she said, her voice turning icy, "your tenure here is concluded." The boutique erupted into applause as Julian slumped, his face pale. Serafina had turned the tide completely, exposing both the thief and the prejudice that had tainted the boutique's reputation. The tension in the boutique was thick as Serafina addressed Julian. The echoes of Isabella's apprehension still lingered, but Serafina wasn't finished. "This," Serafina said, her voice sharp but controlled, "is what happens when people are judged based on appearances. While you focused on me, the real thief almost got away with it." Julian stammered, "I was just doing my job." Serafina raised an eyebrow. "Your job?" She repeated, "Your job is to treat everyone respectfully. You failed me, this store, and everyone here today." The customers whispered, phones still recording. Clara, the sales associate, watched in admiration. "Have you ever experienced this? Hit subscribe and share." Julian tried to defend himself. Serafina cut him off. "You though what? I didn't belong? I couldn't afford anything? You assumed based on nothing." Silence filled the room. "You have embarrassed the store," Serafina continued. "More importantly, you've shown your true colors to everyone." She then addressed everyone. "This is not the culture I want. This is a place for everyone. Respect is not optional." Julian tried again. "I didn't mean." Serafina cut him off. "And what standards are those? Exclusion? Disrespect? You're fired." Applause filled the room. Julian stood defeated. Serafina turned to the room. "This isn't just about today. It's about creating a welcoming environment." But Elaine wasn't done. She faced the police officers. Elaine glanced toward the two uniformed officers who had sided with Julian earlier. They stood stiffly near the entrance, their confidence visibly shaken as they realized the truth of the situation. The taller officer, who had spoken most forcefully, avoided her gaze, while the smaller one shifted uncomfortably, her face flushed. Elaine pulled out her phone and dialed a number. The room fell silent as she held the phone to her ear, her composed demeanor commanding attention. After a few rings, a deep, authoritative voice answered on the other end. "Chief Harrison," Elaine said calmly, "I'm at one of my boutiques, and I think you need to come down here." The murmurs among the crowd grew louder. "Chief Harrison?" someone whispered. "She knows the chief of police?" Elaine continued, her voice steady. "Two of your officers responded to a call here and didn't bother to listen to my side of the story. They were ready to throw me out without any justification. I'd like you to handle this personally." The officers exchanged nervous glances, their postures stiffening as the weight of Elaine's words sank in. They knew the chief of police wasn't someone who took incidents like this lightly. Within minutes, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside the boutique. The chief of police, a tall man with an air of authority, stepped out and walked briskly inside. His presence immediately commanded respect, and the officers straightened instinctively. Chief Harrison approached Elaine, his expression calm but serious. Miss Cole, he said, his tone respectful. I came as soon as I could. What happened here? Elaine gestured toward the two officers. These two responded to a call from the racist manager, she said. They took his word at face value and were prepared to throw me out without hearing my side of the story. The chief's eyes hardened as he turned to the officers. Is this true? He asked sharply. The taller officer stammered, We thought? Chief Harrison interrupted, his voice rising. Your job isn't to think based on assumptions. Your job is to assess the situation fairly and uphold the law. Did you bother to ask Miss Cole what was going on before you acted? The smaller officer shook her head, her voice barely audible. No, sir. Chief Harrison's gaze was unforgiving. This is unacceptable. Both of you will report to my office first thing tomorrow morning. We'll be reviewing this incident, and disciplinary action will be taken. The officers nodded meekly, their confidence completely eroded. The chief turned back to Elaine, his tone softening. Miss Cole, I apologize on behalf of the department. This should never have happened. Elaine nodded graciously. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your prompt response. The story didn't end there. Within hours, videos of the incident were uploaded to social media. Clips of Elaine's calm confrontation, Julian's fumbling excuses, and Isabella's arrest circulated rapidly. The hashtags #JusticeServed and #StandWithSerafina trended online as viewers across the world applauded her actions. Comments flooded in from people inspired by her strength and composure. Serafina handled that with such grace, one user wrote. Another added, this is a masterclass in how to stand up to discrimination. But the backlash against Julian was swift and unforgiving. His face, captured clearly in the videos, became a symbol of arrogance and prejudice. Posts calling out his behavior spread like wildfire, with users sharing their own experiences of similar injustices. Employers distanced themselves from him, and his reputation in the industry was tarnished beyond repair. Serafina, however, was celebrated. Media outlets picked up the story, praising her as a role model for standing up against discrimination. In interviews, she used her platform to advocate for change. If Serafina's story inspired you, please share. The store was finally quiet, the crowd gone. Serafina wasn't done. She approached Clara. Clara, you showed kindness and professionalism. That's exactly what we need here. Clara looked shocked. Serafina smiled. You're the new manager. Clara was speechless. The next day the store changed. New policies came, respect and integrity. Serafina said, luxury isn't what you can afford. It's how you're treated. Media reached out to Serafina. This isn't about me, she said. Luxury isn't what you buy. It's about how you treat others. Her words resonated deeply, sparking a global conversation. People shared their own experiences, their frustrations, and their hopes for a world where judgment based on appearance was a relic of the past. Back in the boutique, the changes were tangible. The atmosphere was lighter, more welcoming. Clara, in her new role, led with empathy and fairness, ensuring that every customer felt valued, every employee empowered. One quiet evening, after the boutique had closed, Serafina found herself standing before the very display case that had held the handbag of her childhood dreams. It was still there, its craftsmanship impeccable, its design timeless. But now, it represented something far greater: resilience, justice, and the triumph of dignity over prejudice. A gentle smile touched her lips. She had faced humiliation, battled injustice, and emerged victorious. The handbag was no longer a distant goal. It was a testament to how far she had come and the profound impact she had made. Serafina turned and walked towards the exit, her footsteps firm and purposeful. The boutique was just the beginning. There was a world beyond those doors, a world yearning for change, and she was ready to be a part of it. If Serafina's story resonated with you, if you believe in standing up for what's right, and if you dream of a world where everyone is treated with respect and dignity, please like this story and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your voice matters. Your actions matter. Let's create a world where fairness and kindness prevail. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and empower.